Multiple bodies pulled from freezing Potomac River as divers recover plane's black box. Live updates. Multiple bodies have been pulled from Washington, D.C.'s Potomac River as hopes fade for more than 60 passengers on board an American Airlines plane which crashed into the water. Officials are yet to confirm the number of fatalities, but sources have reported up to 20 people have been recovered while divers scouring the wreckage have found one of the jet's black boxes. Hundreds of rescuers have been scrambled to the U.S. Capitol after the passenger plane collided with a military helicopter near Reagan National Airport shortly before 9 p.m. Eastern Time last night. Watch our live stream from Washington, D.C. as rescuers scour the Potomac River where a passenger jet and a military jet have crashed after they collided near Reagan National Airport. UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has become the latest world leader to express his condolences to victims of the Washington, D.C. plane crash. He said he was shocked by the tragedy in the U.S. Capitol and added his thoughts were with the families of those on board. Earlier, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky on Thursday voiced support for the United States and praised rescue teams. Chilling air traffic control audio has emerged from the moments before and after an American Airlines plane crashed into a military helicopter. In the aftermath of the tragedy, air traffic control (ATC) audio emerged from around the time of the incident. In the nearly minute-and-a-half recording, ATC operators can be heard asking the helicopter if the commercial flight is in sight. Through muffled audio, more commands and confirmations are made between ATC operators. Travelers at Reagan National Airport have told how there was a lot of sadness in the terminal as news of the mid-air plane crash filtered through. Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz was waiting to catch his flight back to Buffalo, New York, when he saw through the terminal window some emergency vehicles moving out below. It didn't seem anything too strange at that point, Poloncarz said. And then about a minute or so after that, there was an announcement of a full ground stop, that there would be no flights landing and no flights taking off. And then we started to see a lot of emergency vehicles heading towards the river. Poloncarz and others soon saw reports on social media of a plane crash, while rumors began to swirl. When flights get delayed, people get aggravated and upset. But there was no one getting aggravated or upset because I think we all realized pretty quickly the magnitude of what occurred. The terminal grew pretty quiet. There was a lot of sadness. The airport has been closed until 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. UK time, while rescuers scramble to find any crash survivors in the river. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, will lead the investigation into the mid-air crash over Washington, D.C.'s Potomac River. Investigators will surely examine how and why the collision took place. As of now, it is unclear how a passenger plane with modern collision avoidance technology and nearby traffic controllers could collide with a military aircraft over the nation's capital. The airspace around Washington is often crowded, with planes coming in low over the city to land at Reagan Airport and helicopters, military, civilian, and carrying senior politicians or officials, buzzing about both day and night. The same airport was the scene of a deadly crash in January 1982 when Air Florida Flight 90, a Boeing 737, took off but quickly plummeted, hitting the 14th Street Bridge and crashing through the ice into the Potomac River. 78 people died. Investigators concluded the pilot had failed to activate sufficient de-icing procedures. The last major fatal U.S. air accident was in 2009, when Continental Flight 3407 from New Jersey to Buffalo, New York crashed and killed all 49 people aboard. The mid-air crash between an American Airlines passenger plane and a military helicopter took place near Reagan National Airport shortly before 9 p.m. Eastern Time last night. The plane, carrying 64 people, was approaching the airport after flying from Wichita, Kansas, and was close to landing before the crash happened. Military officials confirmed the Army helicopter was on a training flight at the time of the collision. Former airline pilot and aviation safety expert Robert Sumwalt told CBS the plane's pilots may not have seen the helicopter as they were too focused on lining up the runway. He said, "They're focused on the runway. I was an airline pilot for 24 years. I've landed on that runway many times. You're in the turn. You're not looking out here for other traffic at that point." Donald Trump has questioned why the helicopter didn't turn to avoid the plane. The Kremlin on Thursday expressed its condolences to the families of Russian citizens who lost their lives in the American Airlines plane crash in Washington on Wednesday night. Russian ice skating coaches and former world champions Yevgenia Shishkova and Vadim Naumov pictured, were on board the plane that crashed into the Potomac River after a midair collision near Reagan Washington National Airport. We unfortunately see that these sad reports are being confirmed. Our other fellow citizens were there, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said, expressing his condolences to the families and friends of the Russians on board. When asked whether Russian President Vladimir Putin planned to offer condolences to U.S. President Donald Trump in a phone call, Peskov said there were no plans for high-level contacts for now. Donald Trump believes the crash between an American Airlines regional passenger jet and a military helicopter should have been prevented. The president initially delivered a statement hoping that God would bless the souls of the victims as emergency services searched the Potomac River near the airport for survivors following the incident. In a post to the Trump-owned Truth Social later in the evening, Trump raised several questions about the crash, which took place at 8:48 p.m. on Wednesday. The airplane was on a perfect and routine line of approach to the airport. The helicopter was going straight at the airplane for an extended period of time. It is a clear night. The lights on the plane were blazing. Why didn't the helicopter go up or down or turn, he asked. Donald Trump wished for God to bless the souls of those affected by the American Airlines regional passenger jet that crashed into a military helicopter Wednesday. Here is a list of significant U.S. plane crashes in recent years. After a passenger plane with 64 people aboard collided with a military helicopter carrying 4 and crashed into Washington, D.C.'s Potomac River last night. February 12, 2009. A Colgan Air bombardier aircraft flying from New York to the small town of Buffalo crashes, killing the 49 passengers on board. August 27, 2006. A regional transport plane uses a wrong, unlit runway rather than the designated one and crashes shortly after taking off from Lexington Airport, Kentucky, killing around 50 people on board. December 19, 2005. A Grumman G-73T Mallard hydroplane operated by Ocean Airways, connecting Miami and an island in the Bahamas, crashes into the sea shortly after takeoff, killing both crew members and 18 passengers. October 19, 2004. A Bay Jetstream 32 operated by American Connection crashes near Kirksville, Missouri due to poor visibility. Both pilots and 11 out of the 13 passengers are killed. January 8, 2003. A U.S. Airways Beechcraft 1900, flying between Charlotte, North Carolina and Greenville, South Carolina, crashes into a hangar shortly after takeoff. Both pilots and the 19 passengers on board are killed. November 12, 2001. 2 months after the September 11th attacks, an American Airlines Airbus A300, flying from New York to Saint-Domingue, crashes shortly after taking off from JFK Airport. The 251 passengers and 9 crew members are killed. On the ground, several houses are destroyed or damaged and 5 residents killed. January 13, 1982. An Air Florida Boeing 737-222 hits a bridge over the Potomac before crashing into the river just after takeoff during a snowstorm. The crash kills 78 people, including 4 motorists who were on the bridge. The bodies of 19 people have been recovered, according to news outlet CBS, with boats and divers scouring 3 debris fields. Among the dead are several members of the U.S. figure skating community, including athletes, coaches, and their family members, the sport's governing body has said. They had been returning home from the National Development Camp, an advanced training camp for promising young athletes which is held in conjunction with the U.S. Figure Skating Championships, U.S. Figure Skating said. We are devastated by this unspeakable tragedy and hold the victims' families closely in our hearts. We will continue to monitor the situation and will release more information as it becomes available, it added in a statement. As many as 15 people on the flight may have been involved in figure skating, according to reports. First responders have already said they are potentially the worst disaster in Washington, D.C. for decades after a passenger plane collided with a military helicopter and crashed into the Potomac. The crash is reminiscent of a previous tragedy in the Potomac when 78 people were killed in 1982, when an Air Florida flight departing Washington bound for Fort Lauderdale struck a bridge and crashed into the icy river shortly after takeoff. There were 70 passengers and 4 crew on board, all of whom died, along with 4 people in vehicles on the bridge. An investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board at the time determined the accident was caused by multiple failures. They included the crew's failure to remove excessive ice and snow on the wings and engine of the plane during ground operation. A man whose wife was on the doomed American Airlines Flight 5342 has revealed his heartbreaking final text to her before the crash. Hamid Raza revealed his 26-year-old wife was on board the tragic flight from Wichita, Kansas to Washington when it collided with a military helicopter just before 9 p.m. on Wednesday night. Emergency services in the city are searching the Potomac River near the airport following the incident. "I'm just praying that somebody's pulling her out of the river right now as we speak. That's all I can pray for. I'm just praying to God," Raza told WUSA 9. A man whose wife was on the doomed American Airlines Flight 5342 showed a reporter his heartbreaking final text to her before the crash. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has said a briefing will take place at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 12:30 p.m. UK time, as rescuers continue to search the Potomac River. The briefing will be streamed live on her X account. Temperatures in Washington have dropped below freezing as conditions worsen in the Potomac where the search and rescue operation is taking place. Earlier, Washington Fire and EMS Chief John Donnelly said there were pieces of ice in the river as rescuers battle the elements in the desperate hope of finding survivors. The current temperature at Ronald Reagan Airport was around 6 C, 43 F, around 3 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. UK time, but that is expected to drop to around 3 C, 37 F by 6 a.m., 11 a.m. UK time. However, the temperature is understood to have reported to have dipped to below freezing in suburbs of the capital. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has confirmed the U.S. Army and the Department of Defense have locked an immediate investigation into the crash involving a military helicopter. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky on Thursday voiced support for the United States and praised rescue teams after the shocking collision of a U.S. passenger jet with a helicopter in Washington. "Our condolences to the victims' families and loved ones. Our words of support go out to President Trump and the American people during this tragic time," Zelensky said in a post on social media. Divers have reportedly recovered one of 2 black boxes from the American Airlines plane, as well as luggage from the cabin. CBS is reporting the plane broke into multiple pieces and is now up to 8 feet deep in the Potomac while the helicopter is upside down but mostly intact. Here is some footage of a terrifying midair crash between a passenger plane and a military helicopter in Washington, D.C. last night. Around 300 emergency rescuers are now scouring the Potomac to assess the wreckage in what is potentially the worst disaster in the U.S. Capitol for decades. U.S. Figure Skating, the governing body for the sport in America, has confirmed its athletes and coaches were on board the doomed American Airlines Flight 5342. In a statement, the group said, "These athletes, coaches, and family members were returning home from the National Development Camp held in conjunction with the U.S. Figure Skating Championships in Wichita, Kansas. We are devastated by this unspeakable tragedy and hold the victims' families closely in our hearts. We will continue to monitor the situation and will release more information as it becomes available." These are just some of the pictures we can bring you of emergency response teams assessing wreckage in the Potomac. It is not yet known if there are any survivors after a passenger plane and helicopter collided near Reagan National Airport. First responders near Reagan National Airport have apparently indicated the ongoing search and rescue operation is quickly moving to a recovery effort as bodies are pulled from the water. We are yet to receive official confirmation on how many people have been killed, but law enforcement sources have said there are a number of fatalities. CBS have reported that the bodies of 18 people have been recovered. The picture above shows tents have been put in place near the airport. Speaking from the scene, CNN journalist Gabe Cohen said, "I spoke with a law enforcement source just a few minutes ago. He told me that there's a really somber mood, even at the rescue scene. It feels, certainly not officially, but that we're sort of moving from that search and rescue operation into a recovery effort. They have pulled several bodies out. There are fatalities confirmed at the scene. And now we're just waiting for answers." While officials wouldn't give us any information on the recovery, potential survivors, or the fatality count, you could tell it was not good and that, barring a miracle, they were looking at potentially the worst disaster here in Washington in decades. Air traffic control audio recorded the final moments before and after the crash of an American Airlines regional passenger jet and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter after a midair collision in Washington on Wednesday night.